Welcome to Moments with Marianne. This is your host, Marianne Pastana, and we're here today with special guest, tech entrepreneur Dom Einhorn, who's here to share with us his legal battle for truth and justice. So what would you do if you lived overseas and a foreign government seized all of your assets with no explanation? Well, today's guest is going to dive into just that. Dom Einhorn is a French-American serial entrepreneur who's known for his visionary ideas and relentless drive to push boundaries in both business and social causes. With over 2 decades of experience in the tech industry and various successful ventures under his belt, Einhorn has launched one of the most ambitious digital quiz platforms, Masters of Trivia, which has already gained global recognition and generated close to 200,000 downloads in its first 2 months since launch. So welcome to the show, Dom Einhorn.
Well, thank you for having me, Marianne.
Well, what an honor it is to have you here, Dom. Your story is both compelling and courageous. Can you share that with us?
Yeah, I mean, we could probably start with the hunger strike. It was a last resort to seek justice against an injustice that was done to me in France. First of all, I'm a French-American citizen. I'm a dual citizen. I spent the bulk of my career in the US, 25 years. In 2018, I decided to return to France because my parents were getting older. So I settled with my wife in the southwest of France in a little town in the Dordogne department called Sarlat. That's Sarlat. When I settled, I didn't want to retire. So I did 2 things. Number one, I created a technology incubator called Unicorn with a Q. And I also became the president of the local rugby team. And lo and behold, on February 7th, 2022, my offices were stormed by 50 policemen. My house was being raided as well, and I was being indicted without knowing what any of the fuss was about. So a very scary moment, armed and loaded, both in my office and in my home. Search warrant, and fast forward 3 years, the entire thing was a setup. I just won my case in the Paris Supreme Court last Wednesday. Everything was set up as part of collusion, political and judicial collusion, for which we have 354 pages of hard proof, hard evidence. My attorneys currently are filing a lawsuit for the equivalent of 20 million euros for economic prejudice against the French government, because ultimately they are at fault because they represent the judicial. And what it turns out that happened with 3 years worth of hindsight is that I was victim of a lot of small town jealousy. In particular, when I took over the rugby club, which is 119 years old, we took it over. We professionalized the team. For the first time in the team's history, we won 22 out of 22 games in the season, made it to the French quarterfinals. And a few months thereafter is when my offices and my house was stormed by the policemen. So that's it in a nutshell. There is a documentary in production because, as mentioned, I went on a 40-day hunger strike. I lost a little over 50 pounds because, as a last resort, nothing was moving because the system was so corrupt. I decided to be crass and visual, and I just hit the media hard in France, and all of a sudden, things started moving. All of a sudden, I started getting the hearing that I've been waiting for 3 years, which was systematically refused by the French judicial system. And my first hearing, all the charges were dismissed.
Well, congratulations. And I want to dive into this a little bit. So you talked about you were indicted. What was that on?
So everything you can possibly imagine. When you're indicted in France, typically you're being heard for 48 hours. It's a 48-hour hearing with the police. You sleep in a jail cell 2 nights in a row. It was in the middle of winter. They turned off the heat. It was minus 6 degrees Celsius outside. I was absolutely freezing cold. Also gave me a little hint as to what was going on. And then the indictment came down on February 9th, 2022, after my 48-hour hearing. And at that point in time, I was supposed to get my case docs. Case docs didn't arrive. Had to hire a criminal attorney. The criminal attorney said, don't worry, it may take 24 to 48 hours. 48 hours later, we still had nothing. A week later, we had nothing. A month later, we had nothing. My attorneys kept sending notices to the court system. On day 90, my attorneys called me and said, we just got about 5,000 documents. And all those 5,000 documents, 2,500 are your emails. And the other 2,500 are translations of your emails. And they mean absolutely nothing. There is no heads and tails. So you're being indicted on an empty case. Come to Paris into our office and we'll sit down. We'll see what we can do about that. So the charges ranged from hiring illegal workers from around the world to accounting irregularities, not filing annual reports on time, which was completely bogus. And the list goes on and on and on. It was 3 pages worth of charges. Every single one of them was struck down by the Paris court last week as being baseless. As part of the indictment, I was put under an extremely strict judicial control, forbidding me to leave the country, forbidding me to speak to my CFO, forbidding me to speak to my accountants, even though they claim I have accounting irregularities. They seized everything that I possessed in France, so I couldn't defend myself. All the funds, all the bank accounts, the companies were liquidated. Companies, some of them were flush with cash. They had just raised money from investors. Everything was liquidated. I had to clock in twice a week at the local police station. They mandated that I see a social worker once a month, and the list goes on and on. The entire idea, again, with 3 years of hindsight, is that the system systematically puts this in place to shoot people down that they simply dislike for whatever reason. Over 50 people have come out of the works since I've been indicted with virtually a carbon copy of my case. Unfortunately, some of them can no longer speak because they committed suicide since. There is, so the equivalent of class actions do not exist in France, but we're actually putting something together right now that's very similar to a class action with all of these victims, some of which have been going through this for the last 25 to 30 years. It's absolutely insane. And that's actually what kept me pushing forward, because I'm a dual citizen. I could have just left the country and go back to the US. I absolutely refused to do that. As people were coming out of the woodworks, as people were sharing their personal stories with me, I said, look, I will stick around and I will make sure that these, if I can say so, will get their day in court. And today, as I'm speaking to you, the district attorney on my case is gone, no longer to be seen. The judge that was on my case, assigned to my case, is no longer on my case. The bailiff is gone as well. All 3 of them strangely disappeared over the last few weeks. I had contacted about a month and a half ago, the U.S. Embassy as well. They intervened. I don't know to what degree, because they didn't want to share that information. I contacted the FBI and filed a fraud charge with the FBI against the administrator that was put in place on my accounts, because he actually seized one of my U.S. accounts, closed it out, and wired the balance in the U.S. account, to which he had no right whatsoever, into his account in France. And the list goes on and on and on. I mean, it's absolutely flabbergasting what happened.
And that was into his personal account, right?
That is correct.
Wow. So what happened to all of your assets? Because you have several businesses that were highly lucrative. So what did they do with all of your assets?
So inside Unicorn, the incubator, we had 7 startups. 5 of them were started by myself. 2 of them were outside startups in which I had invested. They were systematically shut down within 2 to 3 months. A standard liquidation process in France takes 3 to 5 years. So they actually had judicial oversight, and the judge that was put in place on my case, forced the issue to make sure they all get shut down illegally, as we know now, in an express fashion. The entire idea was to completely annihilate everything that we had built. The incubator that we built was taken over by the local mayor, strangely enough, who we now know was the chief of the orchestra and orchestrated the entire maneuver. And They seized everything that we had invested in, everything that we had paid for, all of the amenities, all the buildings that we had completely refurbished, and they just changed the name to Sarlatek, some local promise, political promise that they had made, without doing any inventory, because they thought I couldn't defend myself, and the day that they were seeing today would never come.
It sounds like with so many other people having this similar type of experience that they were so used to kind of steamrolling over people and just taking their assets and using it, it sounds
I
personally.
mean, systematically so. So there is a woman that contacted me about a year ago who launched a nonprofit organization because she was victim of the same scam 17 years ago. And she's an attorney today. She actually became an attorney as a result of what happened to her. And she contacted me, and I had hundreds of people contacting me when this transpired. So at first I didn't respond to her because I was overwhelmed with messages. And then she sent me a message that said, here is exactly what happened to you. And it was a complete schematic of what happened to her. And I was shocked because systematically, step by step, is what happened to me. Number one, you're indicted. Number two, they appoint an administrator. The administrator works hand in hand with a corrupt judge, with the local mayor, which allows them to seize everything that you have. Then they shut down your businesses. There were 15 steps. One by one, it's exactly what happened to me. And she told me, oh, that's no surprise. That's what they do with everybody. That's systematically a carbon copy of what they put in place in order to shut you down and seize and steal whatever you have.
Wow, that's just awful. I'm so sorry that you went through that. Now that you've won the Superior Court case, what happens next?
So the court case that I won obviously was in the highest court in France. So in order to actually get to that court, we had to go through 2 layers of extremely corrupt local judicial courts to make it there. They refused the dismissal, the lower courts, because they're corrupt. And so we appealed. And as soon as the appeal was heard in Paris, there was supposed to be initially a 4 to 6 year wait for the appeal to be heard. But thanks to the hunger strike, I got an express hearing. Otherwise, I would be waiting another 5 years today, 5 or 6 years to get that case heard. So the Supreme Court shut everything down and now sends it back to the lower court, to the corrupt court. And that court is supposed to vacate all of the charges and pronounce I'm not sure what the US equivalent is, basically nullity of procedure, it's called in France, within 30 days. So that's exactly where we are right now. So the Paris decision was just struck down last week, and now within the next 30 days, everything should be vacated. They also decreed that every single dime that was seized be returned to me, knowing that in the process, since the funds were seized, they also accumulated about 200,000 euros worth of interest. And then before the end of the year, we're countersuing the government for, as I mentioned, 20 million euros in economic prejudice for shutting down all the businesses and for all the damages that were caused. It's sad. It's sad, and what really shocked me the most is that I thought I was the exception to the rule, but no, I am the rule. There are 40,000 people in the country that went to the same thing I went through. And most of them are foreigners that came here.
Well, on that note, we're going to pause here for a quick break. We've been speaking with tech entrepreneur Dom Einhorn in regards to his legal battle for truth and justice. You've been listening to Moments with Marianne. We'll be right back after these messages from our sponsors.
Are you an author, speaker, or expert who is looking for more publicity? Visit radioguestlist.com and sign up for free interview requests from shows looking for guests. Radio Guest List is the #1 free booking resource for radio, podcasts, and TV talk shows who are looking for experts like you right now. Visit radioguestlist.com and sign up today to get the visibility you deserve.
There comes a moment when you realize you're somewhere special. When you discover that each beautiful creature that you see has been rescued from a life of absolute horror and brought to this incredibly free place, here's where their lives were forever changed and where yours will as well. Discover over 500 tigers, bears, and lions at the brand new visitor center at the Wild Animal Sanctuary just outside Denver. For more information, visit wildanimalsanctuary.org. Discover true freedom at the Wild Animal Sanctuary.
It's one thing to become attached to your perfect home, but what do you do when that home becomes attached to you? A family in dire need of a fresh start, a mysterious house tied to the past. Buried deep within the foundation of the old Far Hill Manor lies a centuries-old secret. Dark forces or something stronger just waiting to be discovered. Caretaker, a supernatural thriller by breakout authors R.J. Halpert.
Internationally recognized and award-winning author Judy Goodman works and teaches outside the box of limited thinking. Working with people from every walk of life, her goal is to empower you to be the best you can be, no matter what the challenge is. Born with the gift of seeing beyond our normal vision, she has an extraordinary gift of working with every challenge. Teaching beyond conventional wisdom, her work is described as life-changing. Visit judygoodman.com. That's judygoodman.com.
I'd like to thank Jason Eastwood at Guitarfulness for sharing his inspiring music and talent with us. His music is known worldwide for cultivating atmospheres of harmony, inner peace, and clarity. Visit Jason's website at guitarfulness.com. Join his newsletter, be part of his community, and download his music. Welcome back to Moments with Mary Ann. We're here today with special guest, tech entrepreneur Dom Einhorn, who's here to share with us his legal battle for truth and justice. Before we left for break, we were talking about how you are suing the French government due to all of this financial distress. I mean, you had businesses that were making a great income and you lost out on all that income.
In a small town that is fraught with unemployment, we had created 65 new jobs, well-paying jobs in the technology sector in a small town of 8,000 people. So that's significant. And if that hadn't happened, today we'd probably be 250 people because we were growing like a weed.
So can the people who did this, because with money, there's always a trail. You can always find where the money went.
Yeah.
So for the people that have illegally liquidated your assets and use them themselves, are they going to be facing any criminal charges?
So I can't speak for them, but I can basically relate some of the discussions I've had with my attorneys on this topic. My attorneys believe absolutely yes. In fact, there is a very solid chance that after my hunger strike, which was heavily mediatized in France, I launched an online petition that got thousands of signatures. Every politician, in French they call it deputies, but they're the equivalent of House of Representatives in the U.S. and the Senate. They were all contacted individually. Basically, what we believe is that by the time we actually file our case for financial reparation against the French government, that's when the heads will get chopped off. Because then the government has a fiduciary responsibility to basically go upstream and see what originated this case, who decided to press charges, where those rumors came from to press charges, etc. So I think we're just at the very beginning, in the first inning of the house of cards coming down.
Okay, I can understand that. I mean, it has to go back to the lower courts where they're doing Lord knows what, but at some point it will be taken care of.
Yeah, what we do know for sure is that they're no longer assigned to my case, which in itself is very, very strange.
Did you get your passport back?
So I got my U.S. passport. So initially, when they seized my passport, they seized both the U.S. and the American passport, which they're not even allowed to do. And my question was, when it first happened to me, when I had no idea what was happening to me, to the judge was, is the U.S. Embassy aware that you're seizing my passport? And she looked me straight in the eyes. She said, absolutely. 2.5 years later, I went to the Paris Embassy to verify. So I assumed the entire time it was true. But I went 6 months ago to the American Embassy. They had no idea what I was even talking about. And within 5 days, I had a replacement passport. The French government still bluntly is withholding my old U.S. passport and a lot of other documents, my U.S. tax returns, et cetera, to which they have no right.
Well, it sounds like you're on the right path to get things corrected and back in place. Are you planning on staying where you're at in France?
No. So obviously I have strong roots in France. I'm now in the Northeast where I grew up, initially where I was born, close to my parents. We're both 85 years old. My dad just had his birthday a couple days ago. But I will absolutely return to the U.S. at the earliest opportunity. I will also, and as a French person, I can say so, I will also advise any person thinking of investing in France. I would warn them against it, specifically if you intend to invest elsewhere other than Paris, because I do believe that this case would have never happened in a big city like Paris. But if you think about investing in a small town in France, think again. And I am French, and I was labeled as the American. My wife is Vietnamese, American Vietnamese. She was labeled as the Chinese. France has this amazing ability of portraying itself as the country that respects human rights around the world. That may be true around the world, but they don't respect them at home. There's a huge amount of hypocrisy. It's sad. It's sad, and what really shocked me the most is that I thought I was the exception to the rule, but no, I am the rule. There are 40,000 people in the country that went through the same thing I went through, and most of them are foreigners that came here.
Where can our listeners go to stay in touch with you and learn more about your story and be part of your community?
Yeah, thank you. I have a lot of activities going on, but the easiest way, I have one project that kind of like sums them all up and brings them all into one. It's called Chronicle. That's spelled KRONIKL.org, which is a free newsletter. Or you can also look me up directly on LinkedIn, Dom Einhorn, DOM. And my last name is EINHORN. More than happy to share my experience, good and bad, and whatever advice you may be looking for.
Well, Dom, thank you so much for taking the time to be on the show with us here today.
Thank you for having me, Marianne.
Well, thank you, Dom. It's been such an honor to spend this time with you. Again, if you'd like to connect with Dom, please visit his website, chronicle.org. That's spelled KRONIKL.org. Well, we're at the end of our time today. I'd like to thank everyone for tuning in. You've been listening to Moments with Marianne, where we make every moment count.
In a single moment, your life can change. Moments with Marianne is a transformative hour that covers an endless array of topics with the best of the best. Her guests are leaders in their fields, ranging from inspirational authors, top industry leaders, and business and spiritual entrepreneurs. Each guest is gifted and a true visionary, a recognized leader in her own work, and while teaching others to develop, refocus, and grow, Marianne will bring the best guest and sometimes a special surprise. Don't miss this. You never know just which moment will change your life forever. Make sure to tune in and visit momentswithmarianne.com for more information.